Hola, bon dia, and
Hello.
boa primavera. So it's the first day of spring here in Portugal. Apparently, I don't know how it is for you, Natasha Donn. We're going to look at your news review today. But before we do, how's the weather down there in the Algarve?
Well, it started off, well, admittedly, I went for a walk with the dogs quite early and it was sort of drizzly and grey, but now there's a bit of sun. I mean, it's not going to last. We've still got rain apparently coming till Sunday.
Samuel and Therese are doing their worst, I think, but occasional flashes of sunshine. Enjoy them, if you will.
Exactly.
Prosaic little view of life, walking the dogs, the first day of spring. And we're just hearing, I think, Natasha, are we not, that there's a new American bombing offensive in the Straits of Hormuz. These are the times we're living in, right?
Yeah, I know. I mean, to a certain extent, I think that people are almost now just trying to switch off and say, well, because we've got no control over this. This is, like we were saying last week, it's the kitchen has got the cooks running around with katanas. They're all bananas. There's nothing we can do.
Right.
What can we do?
Well, it's a great question. And you will, of course, your job is to continue to write for The Resident and bring in those headlines that are domestic, national, and international. That's the other thing about this. I mean, in a sense, you're absolutely right. There is very little we can do, and that's the horror of this sort of globalized situation we find ourselves in, that presumably for human beings centuries ago it didn't really matter what was going on the other side of the world, but now, as soon as we see what we've just learned, that there is a new bombing offensive in the Straits of Hormuz, we're knowing that that's going to translate into something that's going to be a real problem for us potentially, right?
It's going to be a real problem next week because petrol prices are going to go up. Diesel and petrol are going to go up, but they'll now go up more. And gas prices were going to go up, but they'll now go up more. And as a result, that will impact on all the businesses, which are already saying to the government that the subsidies that were introduced earlier this week are not enough.
Yes.
You know, and the government hasn't got a box of magic tricks. You know what I mean? It is working with the little that it's got. And it's not like this is a rich country. We may have a budget surplus, but the budget surplus is this. They've always said that the budget surplus was very small, and they've agreed. I mean, the Prime Minister said earlier this week, he said, we'll go into deficit this year pretty certainly, but it's not the end of the world. He said the most important thing is to make sure the country, the most vulnerable are looked after. The trouble is, it's a great way of saying it, but the most vulnerable are never looked after. There's a bit of money that goes their way, but they're never really looked after. That's why they're the most vulnerable.
Indeed. And you use the phrase "the end of the world" there. I mean, I don't think it's sort of hyperbole or an exaggeration to say some people are really feeling that, aren't they? And we were talking just before we came on air here that in some ways the reporting, the awareness of this doesn't do the sense of anxiety and worry that people are feeling any justice. It's like, who's going to be the little boy at the Emperor's parade saying this system is naked, it's not working, and there are psychopaths around the world putting us in grave danger. How do we blow the whistle on that? How do we prepare?
I don't know, because if you see things like yesterday, there was a press. I couldn't actually believe what I was seeing. There was a press conference given by the Israeli Prime Minister, and when it came for the journalists to ask questions, journalists that they weren't sure about, they just made it absolutely silent so no one could hear the question.
Wow, extraordinary times. On
the television.
We will do our best to keep abreast of this, won't we? And I know you do. I mean, it is your job to do so, to find a position on this and an angle on this which reflects what's going on for Portugal and what's happening to us all.
Well, yes, but obviously also as a newspaper, you're not trying to make people feel even more depressed and more hopeless. So you try and keep it as baseline as you can when you yourself are not feeling at all confident about where we're going.
Right. Yeah, indeed.
I mean, it's a little bit like, do you remember during the pandemic when we were all being told that we must go out and roll up our sleeves and take every jab that was going because we were going to save our grandmothers? And when I was seeing all this kind of narrative coming through on the newspapers, I was thinking, oh, something's happened to the to the whatever. Can you hear me still?
I can definitely hear you. So carry
Oh,
on.
great. Well, that's fine.
Yes. We've lost your camera. We've lost your camera for a moment.
I'm not sure what I do. Maybe I try that. There you go.
You're back.
But you heard all this narrative coming through, and you thought, I can't write this nonsense. I just can't write it.
And are you in that place again? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm trying to write without actually writing the nonsense that there's a lot of sort of pat stuff as if to make out that this is just a skirmish.
I see. So it's almost the opposite. It's almost the opposite. The seriousness of the situation and how we might understand it in response.
We're trying to play down the seriousness. Exactly.
Hey, wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I completely can relate to that. This is my sense of the news. Is like I want to shake people and say, do you understand what could really happen with what's going on? And at the same time, you don't want to be that person, do you?
Exactly. You don't want to say it to them because you don't want to burst people's bubbles, because if it's going to be burst anyway, just leave them to be happy for as long as possible. I have, unfortunately, a son and daughter-in-law who never read the papers or listen to the news. I think I mentioned once before, my sweet daughter-in-law once said to me, not that long ago, "Oh, is the war in Ukraine still going?" Oh God, that's a long time. But they're coming to stay with me on Sunday because of something to do with their car. And I said, listen, we're going to have a great dinner, but I have got to explain a little bit to you what's going on in the world, because they need to know. But of course, yes. I don't want to give them too much of a jolt.
Yes, well, I don't envy you that task, and in many ways, that is your daily work, isn't it? That task of reporting what's going on, but without terrifying people. But let's be honest, we are in terrifying times. There's no getting around that. We'll start with a very serious matter, but a quite local, parochial in relation to some of the other things that are going on around the world. And you mentioned this chap last time. We have the influencer who laughed online about a hit and run, has just been served now for this.
Yes, thank goodness. So, and it turns out that he was driving without a valid license as well. I think possibly because he'd lost his license through drink or drugs, because they mentioned somewhere that he had been, in trouble. He's been in trouble with the law multiple times. So the good thing is that justice is being done in this case.
Well, that's nice to be able to report. His stupidity perhaps got the better of him in opening his mouth whilst attempting to be an influencer. What a dreaded phrase.
Well, stupidity seems to be getting the better of most people these days. So, it's just really good news. I actually saw this literally last night as I was finishing. And I went, this is great news. I must mention it to Carl. And then I thought I better write the story, because otherwise if I mention it and it's not on the website, So I just quickly did the story. But no, it's really good news.
There it is right there. Justice served. I did call him a gentleman. Let's call him his name. Tiago Grila faces 3 crimes, including driving without a valid license. So let's put that to one side now. And go to opportunity or obstacle, which I have to say I read with great interest. This is by colleague Michael Brujo, is it not? And this is really important stuff. The nature of this, or the basis of this question. How is it going to be for Portugal?
I was really impressed by this story, because I had always imagined that our tourism operators would always be saying, this is going to be great for Portugal, this is going to be fantastic, because nobody's going to want to go on holiday to Cyprus or wherever, and they'll come to us. And they were so much more mature, and they said, what, no crisis like this is good for business. War is bad for tourism. We're not full of hope. Yes, we may get some spin-off business, but equally we're not immune to what's going on. So our prices may go up, flights to Portugal may go up, people's disposable income will go down, they may not take holidays. There are so many uncertainties. I was just really impressed that these tourism operators were so kind of
sober
about it.
Absolutely, and wise. And of course, their lives in many ways depend, or their business lives, commercial lives depend on tourism. But for example, I think a great example of what you're talking about here is Costa Ferreira, rejecting the line of thinking outright, as in the world's loss is our gain. I do not agree with this view, says Senor Ferreira. Coming to a country because there is a war elsewhere can never be welcomed and does not create sustainable conditions in the long term, he said. Portugal should attract people for what it is, not because of the difficulties others are experiencing. That's beautifully put. Very mature, very, very excellent.
I was just really impressed with that whole thing. But then to take that to the logical conclusion, obstacle or opportunity, it's come somewhere in between.
It is. I mean, let's face it. I've heard. I've no source for this. It was just an anecdotal thing. But Spanish holiday bookings are up, and often, we have the same effect here. So it may be that people will be rejecting Dubai and going further east in the world.
Of course, people will be rejecting Dubai.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, who would have thought it? Would you have thought that a year ago if somebody said, look, no one's going to want to go to Dubai in a year's time because of...
Do you know what? I never understood why anyone wanted to go to Dubai anyway. Honestly, I just didn't understand it. I mean, I'm not one of these people that goes shopping, really. If I go into a shop, my favorite shop is actually the... I think it's called Leroy Merlin. I just love these shops with paint and brushes and Lucy's. And little knickknacks for putting in the bathroom. I love those shops. Yes. But take me to a clothes shop, and I often feel like I'm going to faint.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I hate them.
Retail psychology that's being put upon you, perhaps there. So well done, our tourism seniors here in Portugal.
I think that was a really interesting article.
Yeah, we probably will benefit in terms of tourism, but not for the best of reasons, and they're happy to point that out. So well done,
those. One thing we do have to learn, and every crisis like this, there've got to be some learning signposts in them. And I think the problem with Portugal is we always putting our prices up and saying, we've got to make this profit and we've got to make that. The thing is we are very close to being very overpriced. And of course, now we're going to have extra pressure on all the restaurants and, the Airbnbs. And they're all going to say, well, we must put up our prices because we've got to pay our people more. And we've got to pay more for the food that we're offering you and stuff. And then, of course, we're going to make ourselves unattractive again, because we're already far too expensive.
Quite, and there's no fat on the bone. It's not like the wages can be cut any further than they are already pegged at a terrible low level for workers in the industry.
If you go out, I mean, the little town that I'm living in, well, you saw it. It's no big shake, but it became very, very pleased with itself. And now going out to dinner in Algesur is practically as expensive, maybe even more, than going out to dinner in Lisbon. It's ridiculous.
Who would have thought that as well?
Exactly. So I think people have to be a bit careful because, they may think, we've got people coming, sitting ducks for the summer and we'll put the prices up. Yes. But it will backfire.
Right. On the matter
people need to think a little bit.
For sure. Yes. And think for the long term rather than a short term gain, because that's not going to help anybody. Yeah. Yes. In terms of overheads then and the inevitable energetic crisis. Do you think people aren't speaking about this because they know it's going to happen and just don't want to think about it? Or have some people really got their heads in the sand about what's coming our way and the inevitable consequence of this?
I think a lot of people, do you know what I think the problem is? You and I are very kind of aware of what's going on because this is what our business is and we're in the business of communication. But there are a lot of people that are too busy doing their work, looking after their kids, making sure there's food at night and what their husband wants to eat on the table sort of thing. And they haven't got much time. The news comes on and they go, let's try and watch something more fun. And they're not really aware of the implications. I mean, the fact that... people say, there's no shortage in the supply of gas and everything else, and there may not be, but equally with the problems of the hauliers and the delivery drivers and this and that, there will start being shortages.
It adds up, doesn't it? It does stack up, and it goes very quickly and exponentially in the wrong sort of direction.
Yeah, and then everybody's going to be rushing out to buy. What was it, that thing, the last thing when everybody was in the streets panic buying? I can't remember what
toilet paper.
Was it toilet paper?
I think I can't remember. Often, yes, when there's any threat of
Oh no,
a
it was the
fuel
day of the.
delivery.
I remember what it was. It was the day of the
Abigail?
blackout.
Yes,
It
yes,
was the
indeed.
day of the blackout. That was it. And again, my youngest son, because they hadn't heard anything, they said, "We can't believe it. We were just trying to get into a supermarket. We can't get in. They won't open the doors." And I said, "Sweetheart, there's a blackout. A blackout? What do you mean a blackout?" But apparently, Lagos was in total chaos. Everybody was trying to get into the supermarket. And they suddenly had, all of them had run out of water. And you think, how can people be so silly?
Well,
Because there wasn't water coming through the pipes at the time.
You might be. It might be useful to realize how silly people can be, perhaps. From what you're saying there.
I think it's probably time to say to people, do have, because I've got the smallest house, you could find, and I've still got a little area where I've got loads of bottles of water, loads of tins of things like evaporated milk and baked beans, loo roll, kitchen roll, it's all in there.
Party at Natasha's this weekend. That sounds amazing fun. Right?
Exactly. No, but every now and again I get nagged. Have you looked at the validity on those things?
Yes.
And I don't see all this stuff I've got to eat.
Yes, probably those prunes from 1987 need eating, Natasha. Okay, government prepares safeguards against energetic crisis. Then 3 diplomas approved by Council of Ministers. And there's something I'd like to bring into this, if I may. I think you wrote about the amount of renewable power that's being generated here in Portugal, and this idea that the government are helping people when they're actually giving some of their own tax money back. That's quite an interesting, I don't know, magic trick, isn't it? This happened, I think, the week before last, where petrol was going up 23 centimos, but the government were reducing it 3 centimos. But that's people's tax money. It's not like they're giving you 3 centimos, is it?
No, they're not giving you anything. They're just alleviating the horrendous tax burden that they put on top of you every single minute of the day.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So what's the angle on this then? What will these 3 diplomas bring people who will feel this inevitably in their pocket when it comes to energy prices?
The only thing that sounded quite useful is that when they finally face up to the fact that we have an energetic crisis, the good thing will be that they will actually set a price cap for energy, and then the whatever differential comes in the end will be supported by the state, they say, and will have to be recovered later. So we all know what that means. I was actually quite excited by something that came at the bottom of the story, and I didn't really understand it, but it came, so I put it. It said that the Council of Ministers also approved measures to boost renewable energy production capacity with a view to increasing decentralized generation. And I thought of you when I read that, because do you remember you were talking about how energy generation, and they were talking about decentralized generation and self-consumption.
Yes.
Thereby reducing the country's dependence on fossil fuels. So I was very interested by that. I'm wondering what it means and how we can find out more.
Yes, well, let's keep an eye on that. I mean, I would urge anyone to decentralize their power needs and consumption. And it makes sense to me that there are local energy generation systems, not just, on top of your own roof, but within a village or your part of town, to make you more, better resilience, right? That, I mean, we saw what happened when everybody's relying on not just a national grid, but a continental grid.
I know.
That was a disaster, wasn't it?
I know. I think that's the sort of thing we might be up against again.
Yes, I think you're right. Right. So they're not in the right direction with this. And yes, on this matter of the nice claim, and you've written about this, I think, on numerous occasions, that Portugal is generating a lot of its own power, but we're not seeing a reflection of that in the bills, are we? You'd think, wouldn't you, with all this?
We never will. We never will. But we never will, because it's in the hands of private companies that are in the business to make a profit.
And it
So
kind
we
of
can
rubs
never.
everyone's nose in it, doesn't it? The idea, as it was sold to us, I think, is resilience, self-sufficiency.
It
But
was
we're not
sold,
seeing.
yeah. I think it was resilient self-sufficiency and, looking after the planet. This
Yes.
looking after the planet, and I mean, I've given up with that. We've got apparently 5,000-pound penetrator bombs being dropped today
Yes.
in various areas. I mean, the amount of pollution that's being created in that one area, I
Well,
can't see.
Well, yeah, when you're drinking through a paper straw, as you've been asked to do, watching the news at the moment, seeing a blackened sky because, one of the sides has sent a missile into an oil refinery, you're thinking, me sucking on this paper straw is probably not going to make a massive difference at this
Not
point.
going to make any difference. The thing I'm worried more about also is all these missile strikes and everything is close to waterways. When is oil going to start going into the sea?
Yes, well, clearly, we lose our heads collectively, don't we? When war is on the money can be found for one thing, kind of endless money can be found, and every other concern up until that point,
Well,
including all the environmental concerns, are out the window, aren't they? Off the
the
table.
other thing I really didn't like, and I don't remember the amount, but it was billions. Trump's just got permission from Congress for X billions to be spent on this conflict.
Yes.
Why has nothing been going towards Ukraine? It's all connected.
Or people starving in your own country as well. You might start there, mightn't you? If you can,
Yeah,
if you
you
can
might
generate
start
money for
there.
war,
Are people starting in America?
you might generate money for food to
I
feed
know.
your citizens.
I know.
I don't know. It's an old-fashioned, silly idea, perhaps, but it could be worth a try.
Yeah, the whole thing seems just so bananas that it's
Yes,
just nice to know that it's the first day of spring. At least we've got there.
At least we've got that, Natasha. Finally, then we spoke about Americans who are headed, I think, this weekend, possibly tomorrow,
I
to
think
protest.
they are in Lisbon. Yeah.
Yes, and at the same time, some of those very same people, perhaps, are considering renouncing their U.S. citizenship. New survey shows many American expats planning to sever ties with the U.S. It's not an easy process, I've heard. What do you make of this?
I think you would expect it. They've made the decision to leave the US anyway. So obviously they weren't that enamored with it. And now that they're here, they're much happier. Plus, they're looking at what's going on. So I would have thought that more than 50% would actually, the ones that come here would be willing to give up their US nationality or citizenship or whatever it is. Apparently, it's quite expensive to do.
It is. It's not an easy thing. This from wonderful James Cave, who's been in the business of helping people move to Portugal for some time now. I think he's probably got a renewed vigor based on this sort of thing. Key findings are the renunciation split, while 45% remain firm in keeping their US citizenship, a combined 49% yeses and maybes are prepared to walk away from their American status. Americans, notably alongside Eritreans and North Koreans, are the only ones who have to keep filing tax returns. And the tax authority of those countries has their hooked in you forever, wherever you go in the world. Politics over everything for those definitively saying yes. 83.1% cite political disenchantment with the US, which is quite understandable at the moment, as their primary motivator. And that's what's motivating people to go to Lisbon tomorrow to protest against the war. Taxation without representation among those already living in Portugal, 38.5% list the complexity and cost of the US global tax filing system as a critical reason for severing ties, burning their passport or flag or whatever it is they're going to do. That doesn't mean they're necessarily going to get Portuguese citizenship. What other thoughts have you had about this, Natasha?
Well, obviously, yes, this is possibly another of those articles that's sort of nudging authorities to hurry up with the applications. I think they're still all snarled up in this massive system. We don't hear so much about that anymore, but that really is probably one of the lowest problems at the moment of, whether your citizenship's coming through. It really doesn't matter whether you've got citizenship or not if we've got this kind of problem going, because...
Well, exactly. You make a really good point there, that there is a hierarchy of attention, isn't there? And governments around the world will be giving their best thoughts and resources, presumably, to dealing with the most significant problems, which will be energy, the cost of food, transport, and the quality of life for their native citizens.
And the people who are in the country at the time. I mean, you know, people who are residents and everything. Everybody is important, but they're not going to be. I wouldn't have thought anyone is going to be losing much sleep over somebody who's waiting for their nationality card to come
They're not going to be a priority, are they? I wouldn't have thought. And that's at the same time when people are fleeing their countries. You know, it's a pretty pass, as it were, isn't it? Where there'll be a lot of human movement around the planet. But of course, that won't be a massive priority for domestic native governments because they'll have other things to deal with.
Yeah, but I think people will also, I mean, they might flee and they'll arrive in a country, you know, as a tourist, and they may stay. But no one's going to be worried about kicking them out either for a while because there's too much going on.
Too much going on. That really is.
People will just look after themselves.
Which is what you've said all along. I keep returning to your prophetic words at the beginning of the year. Stay put, stay low profile, because it's going to be crazy out there. You've been absolutely right about that.
I know. I didn't really know how right I was. But I mean, like I was saying to you, I have these nightly conversations with my poor old mum who's on her own, you know, aged 90. And she was saying to me the other day, but she said, you've always said this was the beginning of the end of the world. She said, you're right.
Your mum said that to you, not you to her.
And I said, I didn't know I'd said that, Mummy. And she said, you've said it so many times over the last year, I can't tell you. But I think, you see, I often talk to her at the end of the day. I'm really so tired.
Delirious. Delirious. And can I ask you, what does she say? What does somebody who's nearly 100 years of age have to say about the world as it is at the moment?
She thinks it's the end of times as well.
What does that mean, though, exactly? What I mean, it's
this massive clash of religions that have been desperate for this sort of form of Armageddon for so long,
right?
And they're all sort of like, look at you. You only need to look at the Secretary of State for War to see how fanatical these people are.
Possessed, you might say.
Yeah, bizarre.
Yeah. And that you think that's what's playing out and driving all of this, perhaps?
I think so. If you think about it, I mean, you got one lot of people who think they're the greatest in the world, and the greatest that's ever been seen since the beginning of civilization. And then you've got another load of people who are ready to die because they know they're going to meet their God. And I think 100 Vestal versions or something. So they're not worried either.
That's an unholy combination right there, as you've all under the guise of holiness, creating quite the unholy picture that we're going through.
Absolutely. But so, you know, I think we're it's the same, like we said at the beginning, we're being led by there's Maluks.
Ideologically possessed and crazy people that unfortunately are able to now have quite an effect on how we live our lives. Well, God willing, we'll be back next week.
Let's hope. I think if we are back next week, the weather will be better, because I look, my phone has it does this 10-day thing. And after, I think from Monday, I kept getting suns, and I was like, whoa. This is going to be so great
for us two Brits here. The weather is everything. It's our go-to to bring some sort of sanity to our lives. The sun will shine, the birds will sing, and the children will play. We know that, don't we?
Yeah, it's just the nice that feeling of the air being calm and just the stillness. And I think that's what Portugal is. And in these crazy times, we need that stillness. We don't need this wind and rain.
Well, may all of those who are listening today, who come across this, be blessed with that simple pleasure of arguably what life is truly about. Thank you, Natasha. Look forward to chatting with you again next week.
You have a good week. Bye.
You too. And boa primavera. Happy spring to you.
Bye. Bye.